in the vast, uncharted stretches of the galaxy. The species known as the Kriltar were feared as the ultimate predators. They ruled their domain with iron claws and terrorized countless civilizations. Their armada of ships, dark as the void of space, could appear without warning and leave planets barren in their wake. But their insatiable hunger for dominance would soon lead them to a fatal mistake. The human colonies were young and scattered. A network of fledgling settlements spread thin across star systems that were rich in resources, but poor in defenses. The humans, with their bright eyes and boundless optimism, were considered minor players in the cosmic game of power. They were under the protection of the Galactic Council, but even the Council's reach had its limits. The day the Kriltar Armada descended upon the small, verdant world of Eridani III, they expected little resistance. The planet was lush with life, its cities vibrant with the colors of Earth flora mixed with alien landscapes. It was a jewel the Kriltar intended to claim for themselves. Commander Threx, the lead of the invasion force, surveyed the planet from his command ship. His scales glistened under the ship's lights as he issued the commands to begin the assault. Dropships descended, piercing the serene blue skies like dark arrows. Their landing was swift, and their attack devastating. As the Kriltar forces spread through the colony, chaos erupted. Sirens blared and lights strobed in desperate warning as the colonists scrambled for safety. The Kriltar were merciless, tearing through defenses and claiming territory with brutal efficiency. But amidst this orchestrated terror, a small human child, barely past toddler age, wandered into the path of an advancing Kriltar unit. The child, curious and unafraid, approached a hulking Kriltar soldier. Her name was Mia, and she carried in her tiny hand a toy, a simple plush representation of a mythical earth creature known as a dragon. Perhaps it was the innocence in her eyes, or the strange, soft creature she held, but the Kriltar soldier paused, an unusual hesitation in a species celebrated for their decisiveness in destruction. This moment of unexpected vulnerability was broken by a single, tragic mistake. An anxious Kriltar, interpreting the pause as a breach of protocol, fired his weapon. The blast was meant for a warning, but in the tense confusion, it struck the child instead. The echo of the shot rang out, a stark and horrifying sound that froze both humans and Kriltar alike. Mia fell, her toy slipping from her grasp, now stained with the bright crimson of human blood. Word of the child's death spread like wildfire. The humans, grief-stricken and furious, rallied in a way the galaxy had never seen before. Across human space, fleets were mobilized, and alliances forged in hushed urgency. The death of Mia, broadcasted across networks, became a clarion call that was impossible to ignore. The Galactic Council, forced to respond to the outpour of human emotion and the breach of galactic law, condemned the attack. But for the humans, condemnation was not enough. They demanded justice, and when the Kriltar arrogantly dismissed the incident as a minor casualty of war, the humans prepared for a response that would resonate through the cosmos. As ships readied and warriors armed themselves, the galaxy held its breath. The quiet peace that had prevailed was shattered, and in its place, a storm brewed. A storm of human making, fueled by a thirst for retribution that would not be quenched until the scales of justice were balanced. In the dark reaches of space, the humans gathered, their ships like a swarm of comets, blazing towards a confrontation that would mark a turning point in galactic history. The Kriltar, so used to instilling fear, were about to learn what it meant to face the wrath of humanity unleashed. The response from humanity was swift and relentless. Within days, a coalition of human fleets converged on the borders of Kriltar-controlled space. Leading the charge was Admiral Vera Linwood, a veteran of numerous border skirmishes, her face lined with both age and determination. She stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute, her eyes fixed on the holographic star maps that flickered with potential battle zones. "Prepare all units for jump to hyperspace. Target all Kriltar holdings along the Sector 9 frontier," she ordered, her voice steady despite the tempest of emotions churning within her. The crews responded with disciplined urgency, aware that each order could lead to massive confrontations. As the human armada tore through the fabric of space, emerging near Kriltar outposts. Their arrival was not the stealthy, tactical insertion typical of military engagements, but rather a show of overwhelming force. The Kriltar, caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the human response, scrambled to mount a defense. Back on Earth and its colonies, the war effort became a unifying force the likes of which had never been seen. Factories that once produced the machinery of peace now churned out warships and weaponry. News channels, social media platforms, and public forums buzzed with calls for vengeance and solidarity. The image of Mia, now a symbol of lost innocence and a rallying cry for justice, adorned banners and broadcasts. In the war room of the Resolute, Admiral Linwood watched as the first reports of skirmishes came in. Her fleet had engaged the Kriltar at the mining colony on Draxon 4, a strategic point that supplied the Kriltar war machine with essential ores. The battle was brutal. Human soldiers, augmented with exosuits enhancing their strength and resilience, clashed with the reptilian warriors of the Kriltar, who wielded energy blades that hummed through the air. Draxon 4 soon became a microcosm of the larger conflict. The planet's rocky, inhospitable terrain provided a challenging battlefield, strewn with jagged rocks and steep cliffs. Human drones swarmed overhead, providing cover as ground troops advanced under the relentless cover fire of orbital cannons. In one particularly fierce encounter, Captain Elaine Harris led her squad through a narrow gorge known to the soldiers as the Jaws of Death. They were ambushed by a Kriltar unit. The fight was close quarters and savage. Elaine, seeing a Kriltar soldier about to strike down one of her team, jumped in front of the blade, taking the hit on her armored shoulder. With a swift counter-move, she dispatched the Kriltar with her plasma rifle. Her bravery turned the tide in that skirmish, and soon the humans had secured Draxon 4. But the victory was costly. The ground was littered with casualties from both sides, a grim testament to the ferocity of the conflict. As news of the victory and the high price of combat spread, emotions on Earth ran high. People gathered in public places, some in celebration, others in mourning. Despite the victories, the harsh reality of war began to settle in. Meanwhile, the Kriltar High Command, rattled by the ferocity and resolve of the human forces, convened in their stronghold on the planet Zarketh. Warlord Graxon, the supreme leader of the Kriltar forces, with his scales dulled from many battles, addressed his commanders. "We underestimated these humans. They fight not just with weapons, but with their hearts, fueled by a rage we ignited. We must adapt or be overwhelmed," he hissed, his voice a low growl. The council agreed on a strategy of attrition, aiming to draw the humans into protracted conflicts across multiple fronts, hoping to wear them down. But as both sides prepared for the long war ahead, it was clear that the galaxy would never be the same. The once underestimated humans had shown that their spirit and resolve in the face of tragedy could make them as fearsome as the most renowned warriors of the cosmos. The war for justice, retribution, and survival was only just beginning. On the watery planet of Sirenia V, nestled within a system crucial for its navigational lanes, the war took a dramatic turn. The planet, known for its vast oceans and floating cities, became the next theater of conflict. Admiral Linwood, determined to cut off Kriltar supply lines, targeted this linchpin in their logistical network. The operation commenced under the cloak of the planet's frequent and violent storm systems. Human ships, retrofitted with stealth technology, slipped past Kriltar sensors, their silhouettes ghosting through the thick, roiling clouds. The first strike was against the orbital defenses, a swift and calculated assault that left the Kriltar scrambling in disarray. Below, in the capital city of Aquarius, floating on the planet's endless ocean, the citizens felt the tremors of war. Huge waves, stirred up by the bombardment above, rocked the city. Panic spread as fast as the rising waters, but the human forces were quick to broadcast assurances over all frequencies. They were there not for conquest, but to liberate the system from Kriltar control. Captain Harris, now leading a specialized marine unit, spearheaded the ground assault. Her troops, equipped with subaquatic gear, dived into the murky depths, navigating towards the underbelly of the floating city. Their mission was to secure the aquatic reactors that powered the Kriltar defenses. Underwater, the world was a blur of shadow and light, the waters murky with the sediments stirred up by the conflict. Krilltar aqua troopers, adept in underwater combat, met the humans with ferocity. The battles were silent but deadly, lit only by the strobe of plasma guns and the glow of bioluminescent marine life, disturbed by the intrusion. Captain Harris and her team reached the reactor core after hours of intense combat. Planting explosive charges, they blew the reactor shields, allowing the main fleet to disable them with precision strikes from orbit. The city, its defenses crippled, was soon under human control. But the victory at Aquarius was bittersweet. While strategic objectives were achieved, the collateral damage to the city and its infrastructure was significant. Admiral Linwood faced a wave of criticism, both from within her ranks and from the Galactic Council, now scrutinizing the human military's tactics more closely. The balance between tactical gain and ethical warfare was becoming harder to maintain. Back on Zarketh, Warlord Graxon received reports of the loss at Sirenia 5 with a stony expression. The loss of the planet was a significant blow, not just strategically but also morally. His commanders looked to him for direction, their respect mixed with underlying fear. Graxon, in a rare moment of introspection, considered the long-term sustainability of their campaign against the humans. He decided on a risky maneuver that would either turn the tide of the war or hasten the Krilltar downfall. He ordered a series of covert operations aimed at undermining human morale, targeting their supply lines and engaging in guerrilla tactics. The war continued to evolve, with both sides adapting and countering each other's moves. On Earth, public opinion began to shift as the costs of war mounted. Rallies and demonstrations, once in support of the war, now often called for peace. Admiral Linwood, feeling the weight of her decisions, prepared for the next phase of the conflict, knowing that each move brought unforeseen consequences. As both sides dug in, the war for the galaxy's heart was far from over, each skirmish rewriting the future they were all hurtling towards. Tenebris, a planet shrouded in darkness due to its dense atmosphere that blocked out most natural light, became the next focus of the human-Krilltar conflict. Known for its rich deposits of dark matter crystals, essential for advanced propulsion systems, Tenebris was a prize neither side could afford to lose. Admiral Linwood, understanding the importance of Tenebris, launched a campaign that would not only secure the crystals, but also provide a tactical edge in future operations. The human fleet arrived in the system under the cover of a meteor shower, using the natural debris as camouflage against the planet's sensor arrays. On the surface, the environment was as hostile as the enemies they faced. Thick black fog limited visibility to a few meters, and the ground beneath was uneven and treacherous. The human troops, equipped with infrared visors and terrain scanners, moved cautiously through the landscape, aware that the Krilltar could be lurking in every shadow. Captain Harris, her reputation as a formidable strategist growing with each mission, led her team towards the main mining facility. They navigated the rugged terrain, communicating through subvocal mics to avoid detection. The Krilltar, adept at moving silently in the darkness, were formidable opponents in such conditions. As the humans approached the facility, an ambush erupted. Krilltar soldiers, their scales naturally blending with the rocks and fog, launched a sudden assault. The battle was chaotic, with the limited visibility turning every shadow into a potential death trap. Plasma fire lit up the dark in brief, brilliant flashes, revealing glimpses of the fierce combatants. Despite the Krilltar's home advantage, the humans' technological edge began to tell. Drone scouts, flying above the fog, relayed tactical data back to the troops, allowing them to pinpoint Krilltar positions and push forward. Captain Harris and her team finally breached the facility's defenses after hours of intense fighting. Inside the facility, they found not just the dark matter crystals, but also evidence of something more sinister. The Krilltar had been experimenting with the crystals, trying to develop a weapon that could potentially disrupt hyperspace navigation, a technology that could turn the tide of the war decisively in their favor. Seizing the research data, Harris transmitted it back to the fleet. The implications of the discovery were grave, and Admiral Linwood knew that securing Tenebris was now more crucial than ever. Meanwhile, Warlord Graxon faced growing dissent within his own ranks. The continuous defeats and high casualties were wearing down the Kriltar spirit. In a desperate bid to regain momentum, he deployed his elite commandos, the Shadow Scales, to launch a counterattack on the human fleet orbiting Tenebris. The battle in space was as fierce as that on the ground. Kriltar boarding ships pierced the hulls of human cruisers, unleashing soldiers into the corridors of the ships. The close-quarters combat was brutal, pushing both sides to their limits. As the fighting raged, a larger question loomed over the war. The Galactic Council, increasingly alarmed at the escalation and the new weapons being developed, began to intervene. Envoys were dispatched to both human and Kriltar leaders, urging a ceasefire and negotiations. The war on Tenebris became not just a battle for control, but a symbol of the larger conflict consuming the galaxy. As both sides entrenched, the planet's dark skies and darker ground became a fitting tableau for the grim reality of war, a stark reminder that in the quest for dominance, the shadows cast were often deep and long-lasting. The Galactic Council's intervention brought a tense ceasefire to the war-torn sectors, but on Tenebris, the echoes of battle still resonated through its dark valleys. Both sides, caught in a temporary lull, used the time to reassess their strategies and strengthen their positions. The human forces, led by Admiral Linwood, fortified the mining facility, turning it into a bastion of resistance should the Kriltar decide to disregard the ceasefire. Warlord Graxon, his command strained by the pressures from both the human military successes and the discontent brewing among his people, faced a critical juncture. The ceasefires, though frustrating, offered a chance to realign his strategies. He ordered his scientists to expedite their research on the dark matter weapon, seeing it as the key to regaining the upper hand. On Earth, public opinion was divided. The halt in hostilities gave rise to movements advocating for peace, their voices growing louder and more influential. Rallies and vigils filled the streets of major cities, with images of the fallen broadcasted on giant screens, a constant reminder of the war's heavy toll. Amidst the political turmoil, Captain Harris visited her home planet for the first time since the war began. The stark contrast between the peaceful landscapes and the brutal battlefields of space left her feeling disconnected. Her family's relief at her return was tinged with the anxiety of knowing she would soon head back to the front lines. These moments of personal reflection reinforced the broader desire for a lasting peace. Back on Tenebris, the ceasefire was put to the test. Kriltar raiding parties, officially disavowed by their command, tested the perimeter defenses of the human stronghold. Each skirmish strained the ceasefire's fragile terms, with both sides accusing the other of violations. Admiral Linwood, in a bid to show strength and resolve, orchestrated a display of military power. The fleet conducted a series of maneuvers near Kriltar-held territories, a reminder of human capabilities and resolve. The demonstration was a double-edged sword, serving both as a deterrent and as a provocation, depending on which side one was on. As tensions simmered, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Envoys from numerous civilizations debated the future course of action, with human and Kriltar representatives presenting their grievances and demands. The sessions were fraught with diplomatic speak and veiled threats, a chess game played with words instead of weapons. Meanwhile, intelligence reports indicated that the Kriltar were close to completing their experimental weapon. The news prompted a covert operation, led by Captain Harris, to infiltrate a Kriltar research outpost on a nearby asteroid. The mission was perilous, involving stealth insertion and close combat in zero gravity. The operation was a success, but not without cost. Harris and her team obtained crucial data, but suffered casualties in the process. The information, however, proved invaluable, revealing the potential scale and impact of the Kriltar weapon. Armed with this knowledge, Admiral Linwood approached the Galactic Council with a new urgency, demanding decisive action to prevent the deployment of the weapon. As the Council weighed its options, the galaxy held its breath. The fragile peace, so painstakingly achieved, now hung by a thread, with the shadows of war looming large once more. The stakes were higher than ever, as both sides prepared for what could be the final confrontation, one that would determine the future of many worlds. As the Galactic Council deliberated, tensions escalated to a critical point. Both human and Krilltar forces braced for what many believed would be the final confrontation. The intelligence gathered by Captain Harris had set the stage for a decisive maneuver, a preemptive strike to neutralize the Krilltar's dark matter weapon before it could be deployed. Admiral Linwood, given the Council's hesitant response to the Krilltar threat, decided that immediate action was necessary. She planned a coordinated strike involving several fleet groups, targeting the primary Krilltar bases suspected of housing the weapon's components. The operation was risky, with the potential to either significantly weaken the Krilltar or provoke a full-scale retaliation. On the eve of the assault, Linwood addressed her commanders in a closed briefing, her voice resolute. "We have one shot to end this, to prevent a weapon from being used that could change the face of warfare forever. We do this for those we've lost, for those we can still save." The fleets moved into position, cloaked by the shadow of a nearby nebula. As they approached the Krilltar systems, the tension aboard the ships was palpable. Every crew member understood the weight of the moment. The silence was punctuated only by the low hum of the engines and the occasional orders issued through the comms. Simultaneously, Captain Harris led a Special Forces team on a stealth ship, tasked with infiltrating the main research facility on the Krilltar planet Xerxes. Their mission was to sabotage the facility's power grid, delaying the weapon's activation and sowing confusion among the Krilltar ranks. The battle commenced with a sudden barrage of hyper-cannon fire, tearing through the quiet of space. Krilltar defense platforms responded with fierce salvos, lighting up the dark void with deadly intent. Admiral Linwood's fleets, using the data from previous skirmishes, executed complex maneuvers to evade and counter the Krilltar defenses. On Xerxes, Harris and her team encountered heavy resistance. The Krilltar, aware of the strategic importance of their facility, had fortified it extensively. Fighting their way through the corridors, Harris's team reached the central reactor. With precision charges set, they evacuated moments before a series of explosions rocked the facility, plunging it into darkness. As the main fleets engaged, a decisive battle unfolded near the Krilltar homeworld. The humans, leveraging superior tactics and the element of surprise, gradually gained the upper hand. Krilltar ships, crippled by the sudden loss of their main research facility, fell back, disorganized and increasingly desperate. The final hours of the battle were the most brutal. As the human forces pressed their advantage, the Krilltar, driven by a primal survival instinct, fought back with a ferocity that had once terrorized the galaxy. But without their new weapon, and with their command structure in disarray, they could not sustain the fight. The conclusion of the battle saw the Krilltar forces capitulate. Warlord Graxon, in a final act of defiance, surrendered to Admiral Linwood personally, ensuring the safety of his people in exchange for his own capture. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council moved quickly to establish a peace treaty, leveraging the new balance of power to enforce stringent disarmament measures on the Krilltar and bolstering human positions within the Council. Peace returned, tenuous but hopeful. The war, sparked by tragedy and fueled by vengeance, had reshaped the political landscape of the galaxy. Admiral Linwood, hailed as a hero, returned to Earth, her thoughts heavy with the cost of victory. Captain Harris, among the many celebrated for their bravery, found a quieter kind of solace, knowing the galaxy her daughter would grow up in bore the scars of war, but also the promise of lasting peace. As the galaxy began to heal, the stories of those dark days were remembered not just as tales of conflict, but as reminders of resilience, the capacity for change, and the enduring pursuit of harmony among the stars.